Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod to go over Michigan State's Big Ten home opener against the Nebraska Cornhuskers on Saturday afternoon. Before we start, a quick plea to you, dear listener. Please leave a 5-star written review on your podcast player. Go ahead, pause the show right now and do it. The algorithms love it, and we do too, and we'll really appreciate it. I hope other Spartan fans find our show. And if you prefer to see my mug instead of just listening to it, you can head on over to our YouTube channel, subscribe there. I'll leave a 5-star review. Would pretty appreciate it as well. We're also on Twitter. You can follow us at TFFINOTS68 on Twitter or sorry, X. I don't know if that'll ever get that right. At some point, I suppose we will. But let's talk about the Cornhuskers, Rod. It's an interesting matchup because the Cornhuskers in many ways are similar to Michigan State in that they're a decent team. They're 6-1 in the season. They only have one loss by 3 to St. Mary's in a neutral court. They have a good road win. They won by 11 at Creighton, who just knocked off Kansas. So they've obviously got some talent. We talked about we'll go through the roster in a little bit, but it's sort of like they pilfered all the Big Ten teams. They sort of recollected in Lincoln.
They sure did.
But Fred Hoiberg has, in what we felt like he was shaky position as coach, turned around last year and the year before actually even started, and then it seems to have some pretty decent momentum. So taking to go to the NCAA tournament, but of course, like all Nebraska teams, they lost. They're 44th in Ken Palm this season. Just to give a comparison, Michigan State's 31st on offense. Nebraska is 71st overall, and they're again pretty similar to Michigan State. Do a good job of getting to the free throw line. They shoot it well when they're there, almost 77.5%. They are number 82 in 2-point shooting, number 71 in turnover percentage. So they value the ball pretty well. They convert well inside the arc. The 3-point shooting has been a weakness, but not as much weakness as Michigan State. They're averaging about 31%, which is good for 239th nationally. As we talked about last show, Michigan State's about 26.5%, I think, 26.5%, which puts them at 352 out of 360 some. The one thing that they're not very good at is they're not good offensive rebounding. So they're good defensive rebounding, but offensive rebound, they're 136. They only average about a 31.7%, which is obviously down from Michigan State. Their tempo is pretty fast for Big Ten, I feel like, at 89, and their length of possession is pretty low. They do play differently than Michigan State. Instead of having a lot of assists, like we talked about this the other night, it doesn't really matter how you score so long as you score. And Michigan State's a system in which a good assist rate is generally a good reflection of how their offense is operating. And last night they were 25 to 29, I think, on assist to field goals.
Crazy.
And so that just showed that they were moving the ball well and they were executing. And if you watch the game, that's what you come away with. But Nebraska is not the way. They play more isolation, sort of like we were talking about Illinois the previous year. Defense, they're also very good. 26 overall. Michigan State's coming at 29th. They're good against the twos at number 63. They turn people over pretty well. They're 34th in turnover percentage and 24th in steals. So those are both very good. And they are pretty high in block shots, is number 55 in the country. And again, like I mentioned, good defensive rebounding team at 65. Usually only giving a little under 27% offensive rebounding rate to opponents. They don't defend the three well, for whatever that's worth. We do mention there's an element of luck to there, but obviously it's not just luck, because people being wide open versus having a hand in your face does make a difference. So anyway, that's kind of the general thing with Nebraska, and a team I think that's probably better start than we maybe anticipated. I guess maybe is what you say.
Yeah, probably marginally. Creighton, it's hard. And this is true of everybody in the country. Creighton's their best win, and that looked really impressive, especially because it was at Creighton.
Right.
But I don't know that we have a great handle on what Creighton is yet, because Creighton's taken 3 losses. Now, they did beat Kansas last night at Creighton.
Yeah.
So they're certainly, and they had high expectations coming into the season. So there's clearly talent on that team. But is that Nebraska win a good win or a great win? I don't, any road win's a good win, but is it bad or is it a great win? Don't know yet. They were very competitive against a good St. Mary's team.
Mm-hmm.
To put it in comparison, they lost by 3 to them on a neutral court. St. Mary's beat USC by, I think, 35.
Yeah, right.
So Say, man, we know, if you follow college basketball at all,
Transitive properties, right?
but you know that St. Mary's essentially year in, year out is a good team.
Right.
They've long since been uh, maybe not team 1A, but definitely a solid team 2 to Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference
Right.
for many years, probably a good 15 years or so. So, and then everybody else is kind of a low level opponent that Nebraska's played. So, yeah, maybe the Creighton win is one that when you looked at the schedule, you wouldn't have expected them to get. So maybe they're that much better than expected. But here's the thing. I think that for as much faith, and we have to take it with some caveats because we're still early in the season, and the validity of a lot of these numbers are working themselves out
Exactly.
because we know that they're, just to explain it again for the 9,000th time, in order for these metrics to have any meaning, you've got to assign a value to them at the start. So there is some projection that is still in play. The more data, the more actual game data you have, the more that stuff works its way out of the system. But we're not quite there yet. I think usually you need to get to the beginning of January before you can feel totally comfortable that you're getting a great read. But of course, some of these numbers, we're talking about 2-point percentage or 3-point percentage. Those are raw numbers. That's just you're shooting that well or that poorly. So some of those you can absolutely trust. But in looking at Nebraska's profile, they have the profile of a very competitive team. I mean, number 71 offense, not great, but certainly not a disaster. And number 26 defensively is really good.
Yeah.
So this is the profile of a team that, you look at what they've done and you marry it to the record. Sometimes there's some discordance between those two things. There's not in this case. Their profile kind of equates to me to what their record is. There's a pretty good correlation there. So the one element that's been a weakness defensively is not just the 3-point percentage they've been giving up, but the number of shots. Teams have been shooting a lot of threes. Now, sometimes that can actually be a reflection of a strength, because if you're so good against twos, you're forcing teams to take a lot of threes when they don't necessarily want to. But that's not what's really been going on here. That's a way that people have been staying in games to an extent with Nebraska. Now, you could look at Michigan State's 3-point shooting to date and say, well, that's not a great equation. But I also don't think I don't think they've faced anybody who's in the top 25 from 2, the way Michigan State is. So it'll be both teams are going to get tested. Let's put it that way. You mentioned on offense, the rebounding rate on offense is okay. It's not terrible. It's just sitting on the edge of mediocrity. Whereas the defensive rebounding rate is actually pretty good, but they're definitely operating at a deficit by comparison to Michigan State in that area of the game. But doing a reasonable job of valuing the ball, and at the other end, they've really generated a lot of turnovers. I think you can say Nebraska's making a lot of big plays on defense because they're 55th in shot blocks, they're 24th in steals. Those are kind of loud, big plays that also tend to be momentum generators too, right? And they're doing a lot of both. So a lot of good stuff being done by Fred Hoiberg. I mean, you compare this, and I think you're right. You really got to go back to 2 seasons ago and Big Ten play, the second half of their season.
Yeah, that's when they started getting going. Yeah,
they really started to find themselves. And then last year, they're a tournament team for the first time under him. And right now, they've got to be feeling like they're sitting more or less where they would need to be sitting to feel like they're going to have an opportunity to get back to the tournament again, and maybe, as you alluded to, finally get the monkey off their back. I mean, since Northwestern has erased their decades of futility in recent years, Nebraska's the one with the most inglorious streak in the Big Ten, which is their 0 for lifetime in
Yeah.
terms of winning
And they've been there
NCAA
quite a
tournament
bit. I
games.
mean,
Yeah,
considering they've lost every
enough.
single game, and they're
Right.
hardly ever like a huge. I think they're like worse, probably a 10, maybe an 11 seed. So your game, you should almost accidentally win one or two of those
You would
games.
think the law of averages would allow
Yeah.
you to win once, but it hasn't. It
Yeah.
hasn't happened for Nebraska yet. So they're looking to get back, try to get that monkey off their back. And then I think the other thing we taught you, you mentioned that people need to keep in mind is this is as opposed to the Minnesota game where the pace it was played at was kind of surprising, certainly to me. I didn't
Yeah.
think they'd be able to play that fast. This one will not be surprising if it's fast because that's been Nebraska's MO under Hoiberg since he got there. And this team is no exception. The big difference is, unlike his earlier teams, this team is actually able to play fast successfully. They don't commit a ton of turnovers. They're not taking bad shots. They're not porous defensively. They're able to play well at that pace. Not everybody who plays fast can do that, but they've proven that they can.
Yeah, and just give people an idea. Nebraska 6-1 the season. They've played 2 quad one games. It's St. Mary's. They lost by 3. Where interestingly, they gave up 44.7% offensive rebounding to St. Mary's.
Yeah,
And St. Mary's was 11 for 23 from 3, which is obviously, as you mentioned, those are things that are.
it's shocking. How did they stay? That's a really interesting stat. Those are interesting stats because you wonder how did they stay within 3?
Yeah, well, I mean, they shot 48. They had a 48% offensive rebounding rate.
There's
So,
part of an answer.
and they
Okay.
shot lots of free throws. Yeah, they were not good from 3. They're
That's
5 for
something they
17.
do, and we should mention that too, because that's something I didn't return to. This team, like MSU, they're even better than MSU in terms of getting to the line, and they're shooting it almost as well.
Yeah.
They're about a percentage point behind MSU, but that is very definitely a big part of their success is getting to the line and converting.
And then the other quad one game, the win over Creighton. Creighton went 12 for 42 from 3.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
may have been a little explanation. Despite Nebraska in that game, only offensive rebounding less than 20% of their. So
Well, that would be
and
more in line with what they've done the rest of the year. That St. Mary's game is definitely an outlier.
Yeah. And the rest of the games were all like low quad 3s or quad
Yeah,
4 teams, and they're some of the
yeah.
worst teams. So,
Yeah.
like you said, they haven't really played anybody except those 2, and it's a split. So, but it's
But I
definitely a
think,
team
but
that
I
can
think
beat you.
those results, I think those results, I take, even though it's a split on the one loss column, what I take away from that is those are 2 pretty solid performances because losing on a neutral court to St. Mary's by 3 is hardly a disaster.
Yeah.
And
they've shown they can win on the road in a hostile environment
absolutely
like Creighton.
right.
I mean,
And
I'm sure
right.
that's a
And
rivalry
so
game, right?
that's relevant for this one.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, let's go through the lineups for Nebraska, brought to you by the Brothers to Just Do Gutters. If you need gutter work done, and quite frankly, who doesn't have gutters in their house and make sure they're functioning properly, make sure they are. And if you don't want to get up and clean the leaves off, or you want to never have to clean the leaves off again, they can put on leaf guards. They can clean them out for you. They can repair them, replace them, whatever you need done with your gutters, they can do it. And not only your house, but your business, maybe just a section of gutter that's causing problems, whatever it might be, they can take care of those things. They are super responsive. They're out in almost any weather, any time of the year, which I think is crazy, but they're even out right now, even though there's snow on the ground. So contact the Brothers to Just Do Gutters to get your gutter work done. 10% off if you have, if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. There's Kurt on the east side or the west side of the state. Greg's on the east side of the state. They can take care of you in most places in Michigan. So give them a call today. You won't regret it. And again, like I said, 10% off Final Four. And they sponsor the player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So starting lineup, we'll begin with Raleigh Worcester, 6'5" senior transfer from Utah. He's solidified the point guard position for Hoiberg. He's averaging a little under 9 points a game, 4.4 rebounds a game, and 2.5 assists to 2 turnovers a game, shooting 46, 27, and 71.
Yeah, I think they had expected a little better in terms of that ratio, that assist to turnover ratio. And you'd certainly hope for a little better in the way of 3-point shooting. But
right.
Look, he's 6'5" point guard with size. As we mentioned, this is not a team built the way Michigan State is offensively. So you're not going to see guys with eye-popping assist totals on this team because so much of what they do is going to be isolation type basketball, whether you're trying to find a mismatch
Yeah.
and getting a play that via that rather than ball movement and finding people via the pass. I'd say overall he's been a good addition. They certainly needed someone. He had high major experience. He gives them good size too at the position. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Nebraska, when you look at this, this is a big team. You know, they play in their rotation if everybody's healthy, which is an if right now. But if everybody's healthy, you know, in their top 8 guys, 2 6'10" guys, a 7'1" guy, but then you look at the other 4 starting positions besides center, 6'5", 6'4", 6'7", 6'7".
Yeah.
So there's a lot of length here. And that's going to be a challenge. You know, Michigan State, especially if they stick with the same starting lineup we've seen the last couple of games, you know, I think it's going to be interesting to see who Jeremy Fears guards, if he guards Worcester, because, you know, he's given up basically 4 or 5 inches.
Yeah. And then we have Connor Segan, our friend from Wisconsin, who just had a miserable year last year, couldn't hit the side of a barn with, and 6'4" junior. He's now averaging 14.7 points a game on 50, 44, and 86 in shooting, which is kind of like what he was his freshman year. I mean, it wasn't that high. That's definitely better, but he was a really good shooter, and then he just fell off the cliff last year, and then lost confidence, and whatever was going on in Wisconsin, he lost all his minutes. And I don't think we anticipated him being a starter this year, but he's really shown his value offensively, certainly.
He has. He's their second leading scorer. He's only started twice, and it's because of injury that he started the last game. I'm going to assume he stays in there, but regardless, he's playing a big role, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. It was unclear. You know, when you have a guy who's a really good freshman season, and then his sophomore year was just a wash at Wisconsin. He started the year hurt. Then when he got back and seemed to be healthy, he just could not buy a shot. And with a Segan, if he's not hitting threes, you know, this year he's taking about 2/3 of his shots from three. So that's a huge part of what he brings to the table. If he's not hitting, how much is he really contributing to you, you know? And that's kind of where the equation ended up getting to at Wisconsin was, well, he's not hitting threes. Why are we playing him? And pretty soon the answer was, well, we're not. I mean, his minutes didn't go to 0, but they went way down.
Pretty close, yeah.
He went from, as a freshman, I think he was in the mid-20s to, I believe by the end of last year, he was maybe averaging 10 minutes a game, something like that.
Yeah.
It was a big difference. Well, all is forgotten because he would be the poster boy early on for the benefits of, you know, the old saw it here, but well, sometimes it just takes new surroundings. Well, in his case, that seems to have worked out very, very well because you can't argue with 50, 44, 86. That's some dead eye shooting. And a big part, you know, was Nebraska in many seasons under Hoiberg has struggled to find consistency from 3. You know, sometimes they've had the odd guy like Tominaga who could just be a flamethrower when he got hot, but consistency has been an issue. So to have a guy like a Segan shooting the way he is, that's a big plus.
Next would be Bryce Williams, 6'7" senior. He's had his first year at Lincoln last year after transferring from Charlotte, and he's playing really well. He's leading scorer with 18.4 points a game, almost 3 rebounds a game, shooting 47, 39, and 92. And that 92% is on pretty good volume because he's averaging almost 7 free throw attempts a game.
Yeah, he's not a guy. It's not quite like a Segan. He's not a volume 3-point shooter, but look, 39%. He's obviously somebody you got to deal with out there. But I think he's a more versatile scorer than that. Likes to play downhill. Anytime you're getting to the line for 7 free throws a game, that's really impressive. As anything other than a big man, even for a big man, that's good. But for anybody else, that's really good. So he's having, you know, quietly, because, you know, Nebraska is going to have to put a lot of big winning seasons under their belt before they ever, as a program, receive the kind of attention that other programs in the league do. And so quietly, I felt he had a pretty good season last year, and quietly he's off to a really good start again this year. He's definitely, I mean, it's pretty obvious he's option A
Yeah.
for this team, option one, however you want to put it.
Yeah, there'd be not as much suspense again for player to keep in
Correct.
the gutter.
Correct.
Jawan Gary, a 6'7" senior, healthy this year, finally, and he's averaging almost 11 points a game, shooting 43, 27, 83, almost 5 rebounds a game. And so he's another different challenge for Michigan State at the 4 spot.
Yeah, and he'll also play some three as well. He's versatile enough, and their roster has allowed for that. Previous to this year, he'd been mostly a 4-man, but a little more versatility being exhibited this year. He's just a nice player. He's the kind of player that winning teams tend to have, where there's nothing he necessarily does that's eye popping, but he's high energy, he's tough and experienced now. And you put all of that together, and it ends up being, he's kind of a glue guy of sorts, or a jack of all trades. He's going to do a number of different things well enough to contribute to winning.
And then finally, rounding out the starting 5 is Braxton Mia, 7'1", 260-pound transfer from Big Ten Washington, averaging 4.3 points a game, 4.3 rebounds a game, and shooting 71% from the floor. So it's probably fair to say that he's very close when he's taking shots, because he only shoots 33% from the free throw line.
Yeah, and only 2 blocks total
Which is weird
on the season. So clearly he's not providing rim protection. His value defensively would be more just occupying space, which there's a value to that too.
Yeah,
Nebraska's defending against the 2 very well, so I'm sure he's contributing there. You remember, and it was years, multiple years that went by, where Nebraska always had a giant donut hole in the middle. Like, just could never find. I mean, boy, those days are gone, because they've really done a nice job in recent years. They had the Walker kid that was a Tennessee transfer, who was a little undersized, but became really good by the time he was done. And then last year they had Most, who is sitting out this season with an injury. He was really good, I thought, for them last season. And now they don't have anybody that's quite on the level as a scorer with those 2 guys, but they've got even with Moss sitting the year out, they've got a nice combination of big men that, Nebraska can credibly, physically go to war in this league now. It took a while for Hoiberg to get that right, but I think he's done it.
And so obviously, Bryce Williams would be the player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to reserves. And I know Washington does not seem like a Big Ten team, but they are a Big Ten team. So that's the first Big Ten transfer. And we're going to the second Big Ten transfer from, again, a non-traditional Big Ten school, or UCLA.
Third, because you've got Esijan from Wisconsin.
Oh, right. Yeah, Esijan's Wisconsin. Right. Yeah. So it's,
traditional Big Ten. Big Ten heartland.
Right. The OGs. Burke, Buke-Tunsell.
Bayuk-Tunsil.
Bayuk-Tunsil. Okay. So I'm not even close. Well, 6'10", 245-pound sophomore transfer from UCLA, like I mentioned, averaging almost 10 points a game, almost 7 rebounds a game. He's shooting 61, 18, and 83. He didn't play last game because of an injury, but expected to play this game.
Yeah, it's unclear. The reason I say I expected to play is that I read from earlier in the week that they were I think their last game was Sunday against North Florida, and they were anticipating that he was going to practice, with the thought that he might well be back for Michigan State. So until we see that he's ruled out, I'm going to assume he'll play. Question is, how effectively will he play?
Yeah,
how many minutes? He's been a starter. He started 6 games this year. So he might well return to the starting lineup too. That's possible. I'm putting him here for now, just because at a lot of programs, if you'd be coming off missing a game, you'd come off the bench at least in the first game back. I think that they're probably very happy overall with what they're getting from him. I think the one disappointment would be that 18% from 3, because there is a belief, just like UCLA had in him, he's a native of Turkey, that this is a guy who could truly be a 3-level scorer. And he hasn't really gotten it done. This is worse than what he did at UCLA from beyond the arc. But they'll hope that number comes north. But everything else, he's off to a solid start. I mean,
sure,
he's basically a 10-7 guy right now. And that's pretty good. And he's been he's mostly played the power forward because Mia has been a starter all year long too. So the guy would probably push out if he were to get into the starting lineup again would be a Sejan. There'd be a
Mhm.
domino effect. But if he plays, look, he's a problem because he's a big body. He's 61% from two, or 61% overall, rather. So he's really shooting well around the rim. Um, and he's an effective rebounder for them as well.
Yeah, and you expect a guy who shoots 83% from the line to be a better jump shooter. I mean,
Eventually,
right?
it will
Yeah.
turn
So
around to some
yeah,
extent.
you think
Yeah,
so, and you'd hate for it to be this game,
you sure
so you
would.
can right.
Yeah.
Next is Andrew Morgan, 6'10", also 240-pound senior transfer from North Dakota State, averaging 7.6 rebounds a game, 5 points a game, sorry, and 5 rebounds a game, and playing about 15 minutes. He's shooting 44 and 40. That's just on low volume though, and 66% from the line, 4.5 free throws a game. So again, that's just again shows you for a guy who plays 15 minutes, a lot of free throw usage, and it shows you the fact that this team really gets the line quite a bit.
I think I could be misremembering this, but my recollection is he was a guy they got from the portal when at least they were suspecting that Most might miss the season. I believe he was a later pickup. And if I've
Hmm.
got that right, boy, what an astute move by Fred Hoiberg. Because not that Morgan is a star, but you look at it, 15 minutes a game, he's averaging almost a free throw attempt every 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. The 40% from three is on low volume. It's 2 for 5, but obviously he is capable of hitting a shot. And, 7.6 and 5 in 15 minutes. That's pretty good productivity
Yeah.
for a backup big. As I mentioned, it feels to me like Fred Hoiberg has finally, you look at the last, 3 years or so, he's finally solved what seemed to be perpetual problem that Nebraska had in trying to find competent interior play, because you've got Mia at 7'1", you've got Bjork Tunsil at 6'10", you got Morgan at 6'10", and they're all big too. They're not these guys we were seeing in the
Yeah. They're not
non-conference
sticks. Yeah.
where they're 6'10", 200 pounds. I mean, they're
Hmm.
all legit bodies, and the production's there. So really good pickup to have a guy like that as your second big man. Um, kind of a tag team with Maya. That's really good.
Yeah. And well, I bet you can't guess who the next player is. That's Aaron Eulis, 6'3" transfer guard. Had to sit out last year because he was at Iowa and they had all those gambling issues there. So he's back, averaging 4 points a game on 37, 18, and 44 shooting, which is about what he did at Iowa, which is why he drove my wife crazy.
Yeah, I thought that there was a chance that Ulyss might be able to push for a starting role. I think the betting was always on Worcester
Pun
claiming
intended.
that starting spot. Right, right, exactly. Pun very much not intended. That one got by me until after I said it. Um, but Ulyss was kind of, you'd probably have a better recollection than I did, but I seem to recall that his role was actually starting to grow at
Yeah.
Iowa.
Yeah, maybe. He had a really good game in East Lansing, and I think probably Michigan State
That
fans
might
remember
be
that.
why I'm remembering it that
And
way.
he
Yeah.
was he carved up. He was able to penetrate all the time, and he did never look. I don't think he even looked like that good after that game. I think that was his one game where he looked really good.
Okay.
So maybe that's one that Hoiberg watched and said, "Oh, this
Yeah.
guy's got something." So I mean, he's got some skills, but he generally did make good decisions and was not a good shooter. And anyway, he looked like
Well,
he should be better than he was, I
the
guess.
eight the 18% from three is pretty damning in the early going.
Yeah. And
But
44% for the line for a guard is not good.
yeah, it's not good. It's not on heavy volume, but so he's basically serving as their backup. He's giving them backup minutes, probably on and off the ball, some 15 minutes a game. Uh, and that's probably about as much as is justifiable right now. Of course, he's the younger brother of former Kentucky star, one-time Michigan State recruit Tyler Ulis, who is about 6 inches shorter than Aaron.
Hmm.
Tyler Ulis was like 5'9", maybe even 5'8". Aaron's 6'3". So big difference, but in this case, you'd rather be the smaller one.
Yeah. Gavin Griffiths, 6'6" sophomore transfer from Rutgers. So once again, what's that, like the fifth one we've gone over now from Rutgers.
Yeah.
Averaging 2.7 points a game, 2.7 rebounds a game in about 12 minutes, shooting 32% from overall, 18% from three, and doesn't know free throw attempts. So, guys, not really a threat too much to score out on the floor, obviously.
Yeah, and he came to Rutgers from high school. He was like a top 75
Yeah, they thought
recruit.
they were going to get a lot. Yeah.
And really most of that reputation was built on his shooting. And it didn't really show up or surface at Rutgers, and it hasn't surfaced so far in Lincoln. He's still getting minutes because they, with the pace they play at, they want to and need to play a lot of bodies. And so that's why I think you're seeing guys like Ulis and Griffiths playing as much as they are. It's not because they've been productive in any particular way. It's because they just have to steal some minutes.
Yeah.
But they'll hope that eventually the shooting shows up.
And finally, Sam Hoiberg, 6-foot junior. And I wonder how he made the team. He is not playing nearly as much as he did. I think he really emerged his freshman year. Last year, he seemed like more of a solid part of the rotation, kind of a key element to their roster, and not as much so this year, although he's playing every game. He's just not playing a lot.
Well, 18 minutes a game. He's playing solidly. I think the better way to put it probably is that he's not as important to what they're trying to do offensively in particular.
Yeah, averaging under 3 points a game, a little over 2 rebounds a game, and leads the team with 2 steals a game, while averaging 18 minutes, shooting 40, 33, and he has not made he's 0 for 1 from the line.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the bottom line on Sam Hoiberg is he's already exceeded expectations if he doesn't do another thing.
Right, yes.
Because he came in basically, as I understand it, about the same level of player as the Hoiberg that played at Michigan State, as Jack.
Yeah.
And he's far surpassed what Jack did at MSU. So credit to him for that. But yeah, I mean, still important in the sense that, 18 minutes a game is 18 minutes a game. That's not nothing. But when that period you were talking about where he kind of caught fire, they really needed that. They needed product because they had some guys who got hurt and they were really shallow. That's why he got onto the court in a significant way in the first place. And then he started hitting shots. They really needed that production. Now, the minutes he's out there, it's more, hey, hold the fort down, make the right play, and that's about what we need from you.
Yeah, I feel like he got hot, and then right after he kind of started cooling down a little bit, that's when Tominaga really took off at the end of that season.
Yeah.
And that propelled them to exciting Big Ten tournament where they won a game and then they lost in the second round. But anyway, that sort of set them in motion for the success in the next couple of years.
Right.
So that brings us to the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids for the Clean the Glass Best competition, which has really been dominated by Jackson Kohler pretty much at this point. So you're up 3-2 just because you've picked Jackson 3 times. I picked him twice. I get to pick first this time. I'm going to go with Jackson, of course.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Zapala, which is also not a shocker, but I'm betting on him. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about him last night after the Minnesota win.
Yeah,
but I thought he did, but I thought he played really well.
Yeah, he had 3 offensive rebounds, I think, out of his 5.
Yeah, scored 9 points. I thought he was. I think he scored 9 points. I thought he was really good in that game. And this is the kind of game when I look at Nebraska's roster where, I mean, they start a 7-1 center.
Yeah, there's a lot of size.
So, and they bring a 6'10" guy off the bench. They got another 6'10" guy who, if he's healthy, will play a lot. So it seems like a Zapala game. Whereas North Carolina really wasn't.
Well, that's sponsored by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Like I mentioned, they're the ones who sponsor the Michigan State player who cleans the glass the best. Because if you need your windows cleaned at home, there's no better place to call than Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. If you are in the West Michigan area, that's a pretty large Grand Rapids metro area. So if you have a hankering for some clean windows and want to be able to see what's the snow falling outside while you're warm by the fire, call the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. You can find them on our support page at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/support. There you can find all our sponsors to our show, where you can get estimates for work done to your home. They can take care of it's not just your home, but maybe your business. Maybe you got some apartments, you're a landlord, or high rise. They even clean the windows in the state capitol. So they can do really any job, big or small, inside, outside, whatever it might be, the nicest people. And they'll, again, be up on the ladders so you don't have to be. So call the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. And then we have to come to the 5 keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing provides all our prizes for the season. They are your go-to spot to get Spartan apparel, basically. Whether it's the stuff like I'm wearing right now, a nice hoodie. They've got super comfortable T-shirts. They're the favorite of my family. Screen printed, so it's lasts forever through multiple washes. They have jackets, quarter zips, basically anything you need. And it's all kinds of different logos from Michigan State, whether it's vintage or current modern ones. They have licensing rights, and most places do not. So they actually have a lot more stuff than you'll find other places. And so, Gabe and Brittany are great Spartans alums. They operate out of Portland, Michigan. So everything is made here in Michigan. So it's a great way of supporting Michigan businesses. And it's a good time to get it right now. Plenty of time to get it before the holidays, so you can get it for that special someone for Christmas. And 20% off as well for listeners to the show. If you type in Final Four, it's one word at checkout. So 5 keys of the game. First key to the game is who's better at playing faster. So we mentioned that Nebraska tends to play fast. Michigan State, of course, always wants to play fast. Was able to really get going last game, outscoring Minnesota 27-2. Wouldn't be surprised if we see an edge like that in this game. But who's going to be better playing that way? I guess this game.
Well, and we've already seen a decent number of opponents. This will be the third, at least. I think Bowling Green was actually.
I was going to say Bowling Green played fast.
Well.
It didn't feel like it that game. It's kind of a weird game, but yeah.
They came in with those kind of numbers.
Yeah.
So, but the two that stand out, of course, the two better opponents are Samford and North Carolina, where that's built into those programs' DNA. They want to play fast. And Michigan State has done a really nice job so far playing against teams who also want to play that way. And usually the edge at games like that are going to go to whichever team is able to play fast on offense but keep the floor balanced. And it's also challenging for Michigan State because we know they're a team that wants to get to the offensive boards. So sometimes that can leave you vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be challenging. But I think if either team manages to have an edge in terms of their defensive discipline, that will go a long way toward them being able to play more successfully at a fast rate. Both teams are doing, they're doing similar things in that they play fast and also avoid excessive giveaways. So that part has been, it's not like you're expecting, well, one of them is going to get sped up into 21 turnovers.
Yeah.
But Michigan State has been better at turning that pace into transition points. Certainly, they're top 5 in the country. They're averaging almost 21 points a game via the break. So we'll see which one holds up. But that would be a key for Michigan State, is to play better at a fast pace than Nebraska does.
And the second key of the game is valuing the ball. Nebraska has not, it's done a very good job getting turnovers and steals, like I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Michigan State has been pretty good with turnovers. They only had 9 the other night, although they had some, flurries where they had problems, where they had 4 to hurry. And so that's where I guess you need to make sure that doesn't happen.
That's it. They've had those bouts of inconsistency, and flurries is another good way to put it.
Yeah,
they seem to come all of a sudden and in bunches, and then not again for long stretches of time. Yeah. The problem is, you come into any conference game, at least I think this way. I think history bears this out. You come into any conference game expecting that it's going to be competitive. You're not expecting what we saw last night against Minnesota. What you expect is, well, this is probably going to be at most like a 2 or 3 possession game with 5 minutes to play. That's a more likely outcome. You'll have outliers, but that's what you would expect. In situations like that, that's where you'd be worried about, well, do the flurry of mistakes hit at a critical juncture in the game? And especially against a team that has proven to be successful at forcing them. It'd be one thing if Nebraska was beneficiary of a lot of opponent turnovers, but they really weren't forcing many. They're actually sitting at a higher rank in steal percentage than they are in opponent turnover percentage, which means they're really creating a lot of it with their defense. So Michigan State's going to have to be strong and solid and poised with the ball.
Yeah, and the third key to the game is the glass. Both teams have been good defensively. Michigan State has been better. Not elites, but they're getting kind of close. Offensive rebounding rate. I mean, I think what to say, 3 or 4 of the games of the season, they've averaged over 40% offensive rebounding, which is really good. But Nebraska, we've mentioned also, they're a very big team. And so this is not a team, the size is different than what Michigan State's mostly faced this year so far.
Well, now what's funny is, we're saying that, and we're saying that for a reason, because Michigan State's offensive rebounding has gone from, it's been several years since it's been any good, to believe they're in the top 60 nationally right now, which is good. It's not spectacular. It's good. They're 17th in defensive rebounding. Yeah. They are elite there.
Yeah.
And that, at least close to that kind of performance, is something we saw 2 years ago. That was a very good defensive rebounding team. The difference with this team and what they haven't done in years is they're doing it at a high level at both ends. Nebraska has been a very good defensive rebounding team, a good one, not great, good. They're in the 60s.
Yeah.
They've been pretty mediocre on the offensive end. So you would hope that Michigan State's got something of an edge here. They can really limit and shut down Nebraska's second chances, and at the other end, hopefully carve out some of their own. But as we say, the numbers suggest Nebraska's been pretty good on its defensive glass. They are capable of playing a lot of size, so it's real. And so there's a challenge for MSU. Can they continue to play with the aggressive kind of approach that we saw last night in the first half, especially?
Yeah, and I forgot. I don't think I have it up anymore, but Michigan State scored quite a few second chance points last night against Minnesota. And previously, they've been getting the offensive rebounds, but they just haven't been capitalizing on it. I don't know if I can find it real quickly, but anyway, it seemed like they were much better last night in getting some second chance points.
Anecdotally, it seemed that way, because you're right.
It's 14-12, so I guess not really.
Okay.
So they were out. They had
that's
Minnesota
more
14
in line
and 12.
with what they've been doing. It's been, they'll get 13 offensive rebounds and have 14 second chance points. It's been that, which is not terrible. It's just not. You'd like to see a little better production on that.
And you'd almost expect more too with them shooting 3 so well last night, that they would have. Maybe that was part of the reason they weren't scoring, but I guess it's just something else. So, fourth key to the game is the perimeter. So this is like Minnesota, who didn't shoot very well. Michigan State obviously has been trouble from 3. They finally hit him from 3, but is that a one-time thing, or is this going to be something we're going to start seeing a little bit more of?
Yeah, the overall profile for this game looks a lot like it did going into last night. Neither team shooting it well. Nebraska is shooting it a little better than Michigan State, but not great. They are solidly in the bottom half of college basketball from 3.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where Minnesota was sitting. Michigan State, we know where they sit. So the question is, does last night stand as an anomaly? Or is it the beginning of something that can be sustainable in terms of a general trend? So I think I said this last night. For me to feel that way, they don't need to shoot 11 for 22 again.
Right.
If they can shoot, say, 35% in this game, I would count that as sustaining perimeter shooting. Because with everything else this team does, I believe that level of shooting would be plenty sufficient for this to be a team that could be in the Big Ten title mix. If everything else stays at or near the levels it's currently at, and you add that kind of jump shooting to the equation, that's a picture of a championship contender. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I think, what's got us so excited the last few games. We started to see the emergence of what looks like. And I think, that's also your enjoyment watching the games. I mean, they're more fun to watch because they're, they look competent every time. You feel like they can score every time. It's not like a meat grinder every time you go on the offense in the half court. Fifth key of the game is freebies. So mentioned before, Michigan State gets the line quite a bit. Nebraska gets there, I think, even a little bit more. And
They do.
they both shoot about this. Michigan State shoots at a little over 80%, and Nebraska's 77.5%. So both teams are excellent free throw shooting teams.
Yeah, it's a big part of each team's offensive identity so far. So, and to add to it, the other thing they're both doing similarly is they're both avoiding committing fouls. They're both pretty good in that area too. So you add it all up, both teams come into this game with decided edges at the free throw line versus their opponents. So something's got to give, you would think.
Right.
If either team is able to carve out a significant advantage here, that could be really important. That could be decisive, because the profile is we get a lot of free throws, we make a lot of free throws, and we don't give many up.
Right.
That's both teams' profile. So if one of them continues with that and the other one doesn't, that could be a big deal.
All right. So the game is noon on Saturday in East Lansing. Not only is Michigan State's home opener, but for Nebraska, it is their Big Ten opener. As you mentioned before, they have not yet played a Big Ten game. I imagine they'll play after I haven't looked at the schedule. I'm guessing they play a second game.
They do.
They get someone, a few days later, just because there's so many Big Ten teams now. You can't play two of them in just 1 week. You have to space them out over a week and a half.
I'll say this last night while we were, and this is something you're not used to. So, in my entire lifetime, even post the previous round of expansion, if you were playing the 8:30 game on a weeknight, that was it.
Yeah,
right. That game ends, and hey, it's Big Ten live, and
right.
That's it. Okay, not now. Now you go into the third game of a triple header. Welcome to Galen Center in South Central Los Angeles, where you've got Oregon versus USC. And I was watching it. I had it on while we were recording the Minnesota Post game, and then I watched it to its conclusion. And that game didn't end till, I don't know, 12:30, 1:45. That's standard now.
Yeah,
that's going to be all the time. We see that triple headers that don't end until after midnight Eastern. So welcome to the new world.
Big Ten country has gone farther west. Let's just hope it stops at the coast and doesn't head all the way to Hawaii. Although it'd be kind of cool in some ways, playing games at midnight or tipping at midnight or 2 or something would not be any fun.
Oof.
So
yeah,
I can only imagine. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there. We'll meet you guys after Nebraska, the game. And just as a reminder, too, that Michigan State takes a 10-day break, I think, after that until they, I suppose, for finals, and they'll come back and take on Oakland. So,
and I think that's really just
go
briefly
ahead
on that. So that's really important because obviously, it's the second game of a 20-game schedule. How much can it mean? Well, it actually means a fair amount for a few reasons. One, you're on home court. Yeah, so you got a road win, which is great because those are like gold. You get a Big Ten road win, that's big. They've got one in their pocket. But now the pressure's back on you to defend your home turf where losses are a big deal.
Yep.
So you want to get a win for that reason. You want to be 2-0 in the conference. That's also a big deal. I mean, last year they started 0-2. It's
never
been
got out of the hole. Yeah.
Have they ever started since they went to this stupidity of playing Big Ten games in early December? Have they ever started 2-0?
I think the years before that they were always 2-0.
Maybe okay.
Yeah, and then I think they split, and then last year they lost both of them.
Okay, well, you want to get off to a 2-0 start. I mean, that's an ideal position to be in because then you get that banked, and you come back to it at the beginning of January, and you feel like you've already got a little bit of a leg up on presumably a bunch of teams who are either going to be 1-1 or 0-2 at that stage. So psychologically, I think that's a boost. And the other thing is what you just alluded to, they're not going to play again for 10 days. So you want to be going into that period off a win. And MSU is going to have, we always talk about this time of year every season. And sometimes we see the fruits of it. Sometimes we don't. This team is currently, I think, sitting in a pretty good spot. But that doesn't mean that there isn't needed improvement on an individual level and also on some team stuff that could take place. So, you really want to be going into these stretches where you're going to be able to work on us, so to speak,
Yeah.
which that 10-game gap is going to be. You want to be feeling good about it. I think, somebody raised a point on the Spartan Mag board today that I thought was interesting. They referenced something that I had talked about that I wondered coming off the Spanish trip if that would prove to be a real boost for Michigan State, because frequently you see that teams that take those European trips in the late summer seem to get out of the gate better. I don't know that I believe that happened with this team. It certainly
No, I don't
didn't
think so.
happen in terms of their jump shots. I mean, they haven't been bad, but normally where that shows up, if you think back the last time MSU took a European trip, that 2015-16 team, Denzel Valentine, Brent
Right.
Forbes, Aaron Harris, Matt Costello, those guys, that team came out of the gate sharp.
Hmm.
I mean, really sharp. And that bump lasted for a while. I don't think that's what we've seen, but I do think Maui has a chance to be that kind of boost in a different way, because the team that I saw playing for Michigan State last night in Minneapolis seemed to be one that was playing with a great deal of confidence. And I think the whole 3 days in general, but particularly the North Carolina game, we could look back at that and say, that's when this team, yeah, they had played some good basketball before that, but that's where this team really started to believe in themselves. And that matters. And so you want to continue that feeling, going into a period where you're not going to be playing a lot of games. The games are going to be kind of sparse for the rest of this month. There's a
Yeah.
few, but this is really, it's going to be a lot of work on us time. And boy, you want to be going into that feeling like, hey, we're in a really good spot. We can be even better, rather than, oh, we really got to tighten some stuff up because we took a loss that we didn't want to take. So I do think, not that it's the end of the world, but I do think this game does have some implications, for a few different reasons.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you, the North Carolina and whatever North Carolina ends up in the end of the year, I think both of us think they don't have nearly as much as certainly that they did last year. And they may not have a very impressive season, but the name on the front of the shirt helped at least when they got it. And that's all that really matters. And, if you got to get your confidence going.
Yes, from a Michigan State conference, North Carolina got waxed by Alabama in Chapel Hill last night. So as I said at the time, I think the jury is out on how good North Carolina is actually going to be. But I do expect
It's a
them at this
brand.
stage to be. It's a big brand, but I
Yeah,
do expect them to still be a tournament team. I mean,
sure.
Jesus Christ, they better be, because the ACC has, I think it's 18 teams, and 11 of them are outside of the top 70 in KenPom right now. 7 of them are outside the top 100. So you want to talk about, I mean, I look at that conference and I understand why some of these additions happened. But I said,
Hmm.
Jesus, the ACC, for as long as I can remember, has been right there alongside the Big Ten as the gold standard in college basketball. That's why there was an ACC Big Ten challenge, right? And you look at that conference now, and my God, it is just wreckage. And then you add teams that bring nothing to the table.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that to say, as I look at it, man, North Carolina better finish second or third in that league. Because if they don't, I mean, you look at all the historical brands, Louisville, Syracuse. These are schools with tradition and heavy weight in the history of college basketball that are not playing anywhere close to the caliber of basketball we're traditionally used to seeing. So North Carolina better damn well be a tournament team. They better run roughshod through a lot of that league. But anyway, I think you're right, though. Regardless of where they end up, what the feeling was about North Carolina at the moment that game happened is what really matters.
Yeah. All right. Well, now we'll tie it up there and we'll see you guys in a little bit. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.